Afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the SAEON seminar. So today we've got Dr. Kathryn Morrissey and Brishan Kalyan, and they're from both of our marine nodes, which is quite cool. So Kath is a postdoc at Egagasini, and Brishan is currently doing his PhD at Elwandle. And they're going to chat to us about a recent adventure they had on a tall ship and some of the work they were doing and South Africa's role in this whole training program and course. So thank you so much for joining us today. And the plan is we're going to have their little talk and tell us about their journey, and then there'll be a session for questions and things at the end. So we're looking forward to hearing about your adventure, Kath and Brishan. And over to you guys.
Right. Thanks so much, Caitlin. Brishan, if you go to the next slide. So just a brief introduction into this training course that we were both part of. This is the European Space Agency Ocean Training Course 2025. That's the second iteration. The first iteration was from Maputo to Cape Town in 2023, which I was a part of as a student. And then I joined as a lecturer on board the second one. And what happens is that the course had an online training program for a couple, I think it was 16 weeks beforehand. So a couple months training every week. And then everyone joined on board the Statsraad Lehmkuhl tall ship to participate in the onboard training. And this was a brainchild of three particular people: Craig Donlan from the European Space Agency, Jonny Johansson from NERSC, and Brishan Kalyan from the Ocean Data Lab. And what their aim is to bring together a group of early career researchers and future ocean ambassadors in order to learn about ocean observation and combine that with hands-on training in taking in-situ sampling. And their main three kind of goals was to interpret and handle ocean satellite data, collect in-situ measurements, and then link that to real-time data and try and validate some sort of satellite observations and ocean models. And then also to foster international collaboration and empower the next generation of ocean ambassadors to build sustainable ocean future and develop the science we need for the ocean we want in line with the UN decade. Cool. Brishan.
Yeah, so starting off, we started out in Tromsø in Norway at the end of April, just after Easter. Here's everyone obviously getting on board the tall ship. We had the opportunity to slightly meet beforehand in Tromsø, get familiar with everyone in person, because obviously prior to April this year, everyone just met online in those online courses. And there was no real interaction between the people that would be on board, except for obviously people that applied from the same research labs or institutes. Obviously, first impressions getting on board, you realize you're sleeping on a hammock. You're sleeping very close next to someone that you do not know. These were the hammock situations. As you can see here, there's benches down here where you'd put your luggage, lockers there, and also benches on the top there where you'd split your luggage. Those were where you have your clothes. What?
Brishan, it's a slide behind. There you go. It's just taking a while for the slide to load.
Is it showing the hammocks, Kat?
It's showing the hammocks now, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry. Here's the hammocks. Yeah. So yeah, hammock living. This is obviously the space, your sleeping bag. There was a little mat underneath the hammock, and then you'd adjust these little strings here to make your hammock like more livable while you were on board. This was the daily routine. You'd wake up, we'd be split into 3 watch groups. So your red watch, your midnight to 4 o'clock shift, and your midday to 4 o'clock afternoon shift. Your white watch, your 4 o'clock to 8 a.m. shift, and your 4 o'clock to 8 p.m. shift in the afternoon, and your blue watch, your 8 to 12 in either of the time slots. In between all your watches, obviously, there's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We'd have a scheduled science brief at the every evening after the science, and the science would be conducted generally between station would start. Normally we try for 12, but there were days of 8:30 stations and 10:30 stations, which were hard to get through when you were on the red or white watch. And then
Which
in between
Brishan and I
stations,
were
there's a
both
nice
red
coffee
and
break
white.
at like 10:30 and 3:30. Yeah, so I was on red watch initially. Kat was on white watch, and then she was on red watch, and I was on white watch for the second leg of the cruise. The two legs were split by a stop in Iceland. And then while on watch, you'd obviously have duties from physical posts like buoy watch, man overboard watch, fire watch, and helms post, as well as science watch, which was taking down scientific recordings. Your buoy watch was looking behind the ship to see if a man goes overboard. Your lookout was looking in front of the ship to see if you'd hit an iceberg, for example. But also report other things that you'd see in the ocean. And then your fire watch, obviously going around the ship to see if there's any possible fires. Your helm duty was obviously manning the helm, steering the ship. And your science watch was obviously making down science notes. And then other than being on a physical post, you'd have to do things during your watch. So red watch, because we had a horrible, well, not a horrible time, we had a great time, but it was far up in the Arctic Circle. So generally dark or light in the mornings, and you'd have to keep warm. So we'd have like gym sessions at 2 a.m. or we'd be cleaning the deck like in this photo, but this was in white watch. And you'd be doing things to keep yourself busy and learning about the ship. So beyond that, I'll hand over to Kat here to speak about some of the sailing that we did.
Yeah, and also red watch had to clean the bathrooms every day, which is also a thing.
Oh, yes.
So other than that, we had sailing. It was a tall ship, a sailing ship. So sailing came first before any science. And when you're on watch, you have to be ready at all times to pull rope. First off, you have to know what ropes you're pulling for what sails. So we learned a lot about the different sails, all the names in Norwegian. So we can both sail in full Norwegian, but not in English. And also every time you need to set a sail, you have to climb up into the rigging and unfurl the sail, climb back down, hoist the sail, and then when you're done, you have to pull up the sail, climb the rigging again, and then furl the sail. So there's a lot of climbing involved if you're brave enough. And then also having to know which ropes are which. So in the next slide, you'll see what the ropes look like. You have to kind of, in a mess like that in the middle, you have to know exactly when they talk about pulling the brum braces, then you have to know which one it is and go to the right rope. So there's a lot of learning about the actual sailing techniques. And as you can see, there's some sails, but when they're set, you have to have everyone on deck. Was about 20 people per watch and the minimum times. And some of these sails are 2 tons to move the yard arm. And that is, you have to have everyone on deck. There's about 45 people that need to be able to pull that rope. And then also cleaning up and learning to coil ropes and just general rope handling skills. So you're always moving, and when it's sailing, it's great because you're always moving. But if you're not sailing, you're just standing on deck, not doing anything in the cold. And that was horrible. Yeah, pass on to you, Brishan.
Yeah, you'd always start the watch with, well, you'd end the watch with coiling for the watch that's coming on, and you'd start the watch with checking coils and ropes, generally speaking. And then obviously the lovely fact that we were on the ocean, and we obviously have to brave the sea. So after Iceland, after our first stop and changeover, so after the first, I think it's an odd 10 days on the first leg, then we stopped over in Iceland in early May, got off board, everyone got the feel for land again. And as we left Iceland, literally a day in, and we've got one of those Atlantic storms. So here you can see obviously the movement of the ship, people. You can see safety lines here across all the ship because of how the ship was moving in the ocean, obviously. And yeah, this was obviously a surreal experience. You feel the might of the ocean in all its aspects, from wind to water. And obviously being on a sailing ship and feeling that is something truly incredible. It's majestic, in other words. We will, there is a small video that we will share. It's obviously available on YouTube that you can go watch at your own personal benefit. But we'll just share this video at the end of the presentation, and you guys can get a feel of what the storm was like. Let me try go past this now. Yo. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, after obviously in between all the storms and the sailing, there's the science. So I'll hand over again to Kat, because she was the king of science stations, or queen rather. But yeah, she handled all of this planning and prepping quite majestically as well. And yeah, I'll give it over to her to explain to what is going on behind the scenes.
Okay, so it's not really at the right slide yet, but that's all right. What we normally, so we were on the sea for about 44 days, and in total we did 30 official stations, and that's not including stations that we did multiple times a day. So we did do a couple stations that were like 11A and B. So I think in total it was like 38 stations. And I just did a quick tally on the amount of water samples that were taken for various applications. It was about 600 water samples. So a lot of sampling happening. And so what we had to do is, before station, we used the OVL, which I think Brishan will explain a little bit in the next slide, to make real-time decisions on which location looked best, based on the weather, based on when we can stop. Also remember, it's a sailing ship, so we couldn't just stop the ship wherever. And then we had to make it in certain times. So we had to choose the stations appropriately, figure out what's the chlorophyll A looking like, and the conditions, and then talk to all the students about what they want, what kind of samples they want. Do they want coastal samples? Do they want other samples? And then making water budgets. So one of the tasks that I did every day was talk to everyone, figure out what water they want, how many casts of the CTD, because we had a little mini CTD rosette. It had 12 tiny little bottles of 2.5 liters. So we had to do multiple casts in order to get everyone their water that they wanted. And then that's a picture at the bottom there of the station briefing. So before each station, which we kind of got into the rhythm of doing, we did a big checklist, because obviously things go wrong and we wanted to make sure that everyone got what they needed, how many net samples we're doing. And then later on, what we did is we empowered the students to have a station manager position. So they were the ones that were coordinating via radio with the bridge on what's being deployed, and if everything is going well, and then writing down the coordinates for everything that got deployed, so that we had a full set of metadata to go with everyone's samples. Yeah, that's, I think, it. Brishan, want to talk about the OVL a bit?
Yeah, so anyway, the OVL is the Ocean Virtual Laboratory. It's a system obviously available online. The OVL allowed us to look at satellite data pretty much as it came in, because they got sent certain data products that we were interested in, like chlorophyll A or sea surface temperature. And the evening before the station, Johnny, Dr. Fab, and Craig would sit and kind of discuss what people were interested in, and students would join in, discuss that they're looking at the Lofoten eddy. The eddy looks like it's going to be here tomorrow. Let's go sample inside and outside the eddy. Or internal waves look like they might appear just before the Gibraltar Strait. So let's go sample there. Or there might be a coccolithophlore bloom, which we tried to sample multiple times but didn't get that right. but yeah, so it was mainly to look for features of interest in the ocean, and then thereafter, obviously, try to match up what we got via satellite with what we are sampling in situ. And the reason we'd sample every day between like 10:30 and 12:30 is because those are the times the satellites were overpassing the regions we were in. And then, yeah, so every evening you'd be able to play with the OVL. It was set up in one of the banyas where we'd eat our dinner with someone's laptop, and you'd have free reign of just exploring satellite data products that were available pretty much in real time. And you'd be able to make decisions scientifically to be like, there's high chlorophyll here, I'm interested in phytoplankton blooms here, can we go sample there? And that's pretty much how it went down for the 30 days of sampling every single time. So it's a really, really nice tool to allow for like near real-time analysis, and it's obviously freely available using satellite data products from all agencies, NASA, ESA, and obviously you can import your own. Yeah, I think next slide, Kat.
Yeah, well, just to mention, we also at one point in the cruise, we not commandeered, but we got requested to get the Nmap satellite to overpass where we were going. So there was a bunch of calls back and forth with someone on land who was able to organize that to try and match up satellite data with the samples that we were taking, which worked to some. Yeah, it was quite tricky to do, and I think we didn't get all of the sampling, but we did get a few samples from the overpass.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next thing was when we were on station, the first thing we have to do, so before station, we have a bunch of meetings. And then when we're on station, the first thing we have to do is stop the ship. And when the ship is moving, she's a bit of a beast to stop because you can't just stop her. She's not running by engine. So we have to do something that's called bracing, which is where we have to move the yards in opposite directions to each other so that it would stop the ship from moving. And that was one of the hardest things to do. And when you're on red watch, it tends to be the thing that you do the most. And pulling those ropes, like I said, they're like 2 tons each at the yards. So you're having to pull, like the picture at the top left, with quite a lot of force, being able to pull these yards to get them to brace properly. And then, yeah, I think Brishan can talk about the different types of things that we deployed. If you want to mention
Yeah,
ones on the
so
screen
on
here.
station, there's multiple different things that happened. Some of them, as seen in the slide, is like your high-speed net, bottom left, the small one at the back. The manta trawl that looks like a T-shaped net for microplastics. The high-speed net was for phytoplankton. The picture on your right shows the zooplankton bongo net. WP2, obviously for collecting zooplankton, sent down to 200 meters. On the next slide, Kat, there's obviously some cool instruments that we deployed. It's like your Argo float. We deployed 2 BGC Argo floats on board, which was pretty amazing. Obviously, your general CTD, that was obviously the Niskins and all of that for water sampling. We, in general, like Kat said, because of the Niskin bottle size, we had to do multiple casts per station, which is generally about 3 casts per station, given the amount of water that everyone wanted. And this was also limited to 1,200 meters depth. And then every other station, we deploy a suite of different types of buoys that were available. A lot of them wave buoys, like the one you see on the picture on the right. And this is obviously to gather in-situ satellites. We even deployed and retrieved some wave buoys and stuff like that when we were in a few of the ones. And then following, obviously, all the sample process, I mean, the collecting of all the samples at the end of the day is the science brief. Science brief would either gather on deck during good weather or indoors during bad weather. And then Craig would give a rundown of what happened. There'd be general announcements. The science coordinator on board would also give a rundown of how operations went, what can we improve on, what we can do better, or what worked, what didn't work, and then any input from everyone around. and then your other if there were any other ship announcements that get mentioned at the same time. And then obviously at the same time, while science brief was going on, some people are down in the lab, as you can see on the photo on the right, processing samples, filtering samples, making sure stuff is ready to get put into storage, obviously for analysis when we're back on land. Yeah, and then thereafter, obviously, it was all the learning that happened during this process for everyone on board, including ship crew, because this is the first time that the ship itself had such extensive scientific expedition on board. Prior to when Kat did it the first time as a student, they were using handheld niskins and no winch system and stuff like that. It was a completely different experience for everyone. This obviously allowed for on-the-go learning all the time while we were on the ship for everyone on board, and this included people that did obviously different types of science, but there was also a contingent of citizen scientists on board that were ever asking questions about what is it we're doing, why are we interested in it. And then not only the citizen scientists, obviously the ship crew themselves, because they're all sailors at heart. They gain a better understanding of what the science is about and why is it important, even though it stops the sailing sometimes. So yeah, and then after that is obviously all our projects, which I think I'll hand over to Kat for.
Yeah. So the course consisted of 3 different groups. So there was ASC interactions, physics, and then biology. And we were encouraging students to create their own projects that they brought on board, that then they could fine tune while they were on board. And we even had some projects by Ollie, the person standing there with the net, who designed a project that he wanted to do, like a marathon trawl, where we every hour or every 2 hours we sampled we did a net sampling, a high-speed net sampling, some bacterial sampling, and nutrients analysis. So the idea was to encourage students to really think about the projects, feel in touch with the ocean, understand different properties that they wanted to sample. We even had students that built their own CTDs on board, like the bottom left there. That's an open CTD that they built on board. There were students that brought their own alkalinity sensors that they built as well, and they refined and optimized on board. So the whole purpose was, to encourage student learning. And yeah, Brishan, you want to talk a bit about the lectures?
Yeah, so after the science briefs and dinner, we'd have a lecture by one of the lecturing body people on board. So including Kat, there were various others on board. In the second slide, you see their faces. They obviously taught us about a vast amount of different things, from satellites to in-situ sampling to policies to how space agencies work, what is the logic behind launching satellites, how do we launch satellites. We even had, I think, a theoretical lecture on quantum physics the one night. So yeah, it was just a lot of information every evening about how things operate. And this information obviously broadened horizons, got people talking about things, it got people speaking about how things work, and obviously collaborating on things. Started ideas about small projects like the marathon transact that we did, where we sampled every hour. And yeah, so this obviously happened every evening, and it was hosted through the lecture team. And all the students would, obviously you'd also still be on duty at the time during your watches. So when you can, you'd make it. If you couldn't, you'd catch up through communicating with your peers and colleagues on board, or approaching the lecturers that were literally in the same banya as you, possibly even sleeping next to you, to chat to them about anything that was questioned or mentioned, which was really nice. And then to get to the fun part, I guess we'll hand over to Kat to speak to you about when things go wrong in the middle of the ocean.
So while we all lived and breathed sailing and science, that was the only things we really spoke about, was sailing science, and then obviously getting to know each other. Just like some people, some of the equipment also broke. Not that it broke us, but yeah, we had the CTD cable on the first leg snapped, or didn't snap. It got water into the terminus, so we had to re-terminate the CTD on board, which let us, because obviously you have to let things like we have to take time to fix it. We had to use hand winches to get certain things up, like the nets that were going down to like 100 meters. And then also go back to old school basics of handheld niskins to get water. So if you thought that, you know, the little rosette was a small amount of water, you can imagine now with a one handheld 2.5 liter niskin, or I think this was a 5 liter niskin. We had to deploy it multiple times and hand haul it up from the depths. So we had to work on the fly and really like problem solve and troubleshoot and adapt. And the students had to adapt their sampling protocols in order to accommodate for that. Luckily, we were able to get the CTD working again by the second leg. But yeah, there were a couple stations where we did complete handheld and like back to basics. All right, Brishan.
Yeah, and then obviously with being on sea for so long, some good old sea traditions got taught to us by Hakon, the foundation, Statsraad Lehmkuhl's foundation CEO. Did a bit of history on sea shanties, which is amazing. Didn't know so much. I didn't know it was such a big thing. I mean, it makes sense after spending 44 days at sea. But yeah, he taught us quite a few of like traditional sea shanties, what they mean, how they were used, what they were used for. And then we had our own sea shanty competitions. We made up our own. People were going crazy. And it was fun. It's good old fun. And it takes the edge off, I guess, being at sea for that long. If Kat goes to the next slide, if the video plays, there's a little stint of what it was like. And you guys can have a
All the rats have left, and we the crew take. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, it's time by jam that we went to, and it's time for us to leave her. Louder! Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. And again, leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done, and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her.
Yeah, so so that's what it was like. And then other than that, so other than that, we got to celebrate Norwegian Day, which is like the traditional the day of independence of Norway, which was really, really special, and it was nice to be a part of. It was also something special for the crew, because I think it was the first time a few of them had spent that day away from Norway itself. And then other than that, we had stuff like Pirate Day, swimming in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean Sea, and just all good old, like, they obviously barbecues on deck, but good old braai on deck. But yeah, that obviously takes the edge off of weeks of work, and allows everyone to have a bit of fun, breaks the ice. And there was games that people played on deck, good old pirate games, if you want to call them that. And yeah, just to have a bit of fun. Next slide, Kat. I think
we also crossed the polar circle, and so there were some tasks we had to do in order to do that, which you can see Neptune and his comrades there who hazed us a bit. We had to have a cold water shower and eat some horrible stuff. But yeah, it was all in a little bit of fun to ease the tensions of being on board and in such close quarters all the time. Yeah, and then, like I said, there was a bit of rope tying. We learned how to tie various ropes in order for us to be able to do the sailing. And they also made that a little bit more fun. In the White Watch, the first watch that I was on, we did a rope tying contest, which I won. Yeah. And that was on who could tie the rope the fastest and the most correct. So there was a lot of like practice and obviously a little bit of ego in order to figure out who was the champion on that. But then I'm going to pass on to Brishan about what did we get out of this.
So in terms of what we got out, I mean, like personal experience and personal growth is something that you can't really account for. But in terms of the science, so if Kat goes to the next slide, we'll speak about the crazy temperatures that we went through. Starting out on the left, obviously in the Arctic Circle up in Norway, really, really cold waters all the way to the right in the Mediterranean, just off the coast of Nice. Really, really warm Mediterranean waters. So it was really spectacular to be traveling across this type of ocean. On the next slide, Kat, I think there's salinity. Yeah, so obviously the different salinity that we saw, more saline waters in the Med, the different types of water masses we traveled through these temperature salinity diagrams, all the different stations we did where we had and didn't have CTDs. And then obviously the chlorophyll A, because phytoplankton. So yeah, some blooms that we targeted or were able to target through to using the OVL and what we saw. The next slide is, I think, the phytos. Oh,
Yeah.
this was the inline system for chlorophyll A. Yeah, and then obviously all the majestic phytoplankton that we saw on while traveling. So while traveling, I obviously had the opportunity to sample phytoplankton, but we had this cool microscope on board called the Curiosity microscope, which allowed me to take photos of them just using my laptop. And these were some of the specimens we found while traveling from the North Atlantic into the Med. And that's the gist of the science, I think, in general, other than a few things that Kat will add next up.
Yeah, so we also saw some crazy wildlife, some whales, some dolphins. There's nothing like trying to put down a CTD and seeing a dolphin come past or some whales. So we also took a log of what kind of mammals we saw and interesting things. And then, yeah, I think the last things is just basic experience. It was really, really hard and tough to be on board. Lack of sleep. I think there was a whole week where I got less than 4 hours sleep a night. But I mean, the beauty that's around you and the ocean that's around you is kind of quite majestic when you're on board. I don't know if Brishan has anything else to add.
Yeah, it was obviously incredible to meet a lot of people doing the same things and passionate about the ocean as passionate as we are. And it's just to see how things get done in the North. I guess that was pretty incredible for me because it's the first time I've done science in the Northern Hemisphere and done like been on the ocean. So that was pretty incredible, something surreal. And it's obviously surreal being out in the Arctic Circle and traveling the ocean we traveled, let alone on a sailing boat, which was obviously something incredible. Didn't know I'd like sailing that much up until obviously being, I don't think anyone knows they like sailing that much up until they've been on a sailing boat. And yeah, it's just the raw experience, the experience of trying to do science and going through a storm. And yeah, and we obviously ended off the cruise really, really nicely at UNOC in Nice, and a lot came out of it. I think on the next slide, it's stuff like the mission statement and manifesto that we came up with as a group, and all the friends that obviously got made from sailing crew to scientists to lecturers to everyone that was on board kind of became this one big family at the end of it. So it was really, really nice.
Yeah, we also learned the resilience of South Africans and those from the Southern Hemisphere.
True.
We were the ones that slept the least and did the most. I mean, we're a little bit biased, but we also at one stage, Craig would always come and ask me or Brishan if we wanted a sample. And our answer was always yes. And everyone else was like, oh, but no one wants to sample. And they're like, but Brishan and Kat want a sample. and they're like, stop asking them. So that's why we ended up with 30. I think the original plan was only to do 24 or something stations. Originally it was 17, and then that got pushed up to like 24, being optimistic, thinking we wouldn't get that number. But we did over, 30 stations, different sampling sites, because we wanted to sample. I mean, we weren't going to be in these waters ever again, so it was, an experience. And yeah, just thank you for listening. A big thank you to ESA, NASA, SAEON, and Statsraad Lehmkuhl Foundation for everything that they did. All of the photos on here are from Joel and from Ocean Media Lab. There's a lot of content that was produced. There are some blogs, independent blogs, but there's also the ESA blogs. If you go onto the website, I'm sure you can find them. I mean, we can also share these links with everyone. There is also a couple YouTube videos that were created. And with Ocean Media Lab being on board, they're actually making a documentary. So there will be a documentary about the expedition. I'm not sure when that's coming out, but they were filming quite a lot of different things when you're in your worst tired phase. So yeah, if there are any questions, I don't know if Brishan has anything else to add.
No, nothing. I guess questions first, and then if people want at the end, before we end off, we can maybe play that video of the storm.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kat and Brishan. It sounds like you had an incredible yet difficult and challenging but rewarding adventure. And got a lot out of it. So yeah, if anybody has questions, you're welcome to raise up your hand. If you want to ask about the experiences that they had or some of the data they collected and stuff, you're welcome to do that. Or if you'd prefer, you can use the chat, but we'd prefer to hear from you.
Thinking maybe I can play that video from the storm.
Yeah, I think so.
And then
Anyone has any questions, they can
just
chime in.
making sure that it is with sound. Yes.
So yeah, if you have questions, you can raise them up and we'll answer them after the video.
Is it playing? Right, let's go.
Just to watch that.
Yeah, thanks for that. You guys had an interesting time on the ship. I think the video shows some of the challenges a little bit. Anybody have questions?
Kat and Brishan,
Uh,
thank you very much for the presentation. It was really good. I'm very jealous. I haven't had this experience yet, so I'm sure you enjoyed it. Just a question on, do you think will there be further opportunities for other students from the region to join on such an expedition? And do they always do the same route? Or I know they continued on for this, as part of this expedition to other areas. But what is their cruise plan look like for the next couple of years?
So the OTC is separate to the One Ocean Expedition. So normally they do a leg or two of the One Ocean Expedition. In 2023, it was a circumnavigation. And then the OTC was Maputo to Cape Town. So obviously Southern Hemisphere. And then this year they only did the North. And so the only options were the North. But I've been chatting to Craig a little bit, and he said that potentially there will be another circumnavigation in 2028, 2029. So look out for applications there. My plan is to try and be involved again, whether or not I actually go, just with the lecturing and the management, because we did a couple management meetings beforehand where we had to get the equipment on board and all of that as well. Yeah, the way in which I would like it to pan out is that if we can, for each respective labs for the biology work, to actually have funding available for students to process the samples, because we found that some of the students would come on board, take samples, and then some of them didn't have the funding to process any of the samples because it wasn't related to a specific project. And so I've been chatting to Craig about that as an option, at least trying to apply for funding, whether it's, hosting people that can do like genetic work or whatever. And yeah, so the target is 2028, 2029, and they want to do circumnavigation. The consensus from this trip, because I just see that Grace sent a message saying, how did we keep warm, is to do warmer waters. Because what we found is in the first, when you're standing on deck at -1, people don't really want to do anything. They just want to sleep. A lot of people on the first leg just slept when they weren't on deck because they were just so cold. And yeah, we kept warm with good gear, which I did not have enough. I was wearing all my clothes at one point. And then I got a full suit from the ship. Even though I thought I was prepared, I was not well prepared for the cold. But yeah, the consensus was to do something a little bit warmer, and Craig was convinced to maybe doing like the Caribbean. And I was like, well, that would be nice, but we're not sure. I think they're in the planning stages for the next cruise. And yeah, but we'll let you guys know. We'll send an email out.
Yeah, and maybe if there's not another question, just one from me. Obviously, because it's a sailing ship, it's always heeled over. So how did you find working on your laptop or on a microscope or any of the laboratory type stuff when the ship is constantly at an angle?
Brishan, do you want to talk about that?
It was okay. Like laptops and stuff on the banyas, it was okay. Under like the first level under, it wasn't too bad. Even when you went down, they only had 2 levels that we were allowed on. So down in the lab, which was a second level below the banya, doing microscope work wasn't too bad. Taking photos on that Curiosity was fine, but I also had those chamber slides, so you cover the top and the water kind of doesn't move. Because it's an enclosed environment. So it wasn't too bad, but I mean, under rough conditions, you can't do anything. Like when
Yeah, it was
when we were in that storm, we did absolutely nothing. But in general, it was okay. Even with the seasickness and stuff, I think after a couple of days, your body or your head gets used to it. So
some people. But yeah, ratchet straps were our friends. Everything was ratcheted down. We had a couple instances where we would like have to go and call the students to come and strap their stuff down because it would be
They
calm
open.
waters and it'd be fine. And then you go down and the whole thing is moving to the one side. So being consistent with them strapping everything on and tight. So when you're done working, clean up your space. We try to like instill that in the students. And then also just to mention, like, yeah, there is also, I mean, microscope and because we did have a normal microscope, a confocal microscope, but then like having to look at that and not get seasick is not the best. Luckily, I don't really get seasick, but a lot of people got seasick, especially the first couple of days. The problem with that is if you're on seasickness medication, you're not allowed up in the rigging. So the first couple of days, we had very few people that were able to climb up and help with the sailing, and also scientific equipment, like, you know, you're trying to deploy a CTD and everyone else is throwing up on the other side. So yeah, it's not fun.
Like you had to come up with a plan and learn a lot as well. Are there any other questions or anything people want to add?
There's a question from Grace saying, could you use the internet? So the purpose of the boat is to not have internet. So the students don't have any internet. We tell them that beforehand. They have to like they have to download all the papers they want. They have to have everything running offline because the internet is quite expensive. I had the option to have, I think it was like 880 megs or something. It was a really small amount per day to help download papers and stuff for students if they needed something desperately. But the idea was that it's, you know, switch off. And I think that's an aspect we didn't talk about, Brish, is the fact that no one had phones. So no one's scrolling on Instagram while you're standing on deck and you could actually talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah, but they all, as soon as you had internet, everyone's phones was out.
Thanks for that. It must have also been interesting, people initially, especially not having your phone or being able to Google anything. Anybody else have questions? We have a final call for questions. Okay, I think we're all good. No more questions. Thank you so much, Kat and Brishan. And yeah, it was a very nice to hear about your journey and some of the challenges and stuff you went through. And I think it sounds like you'd be very keen to do it again as well, even after all of the challenges. And thank you everybody for joining us. So hopefully we'll see you at our next seminar and we'll be sending out invites quite soon on the details for them. So thanks everybody. Bye.
Yes, thank
Bye,
you.
thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.